In this tutorial, I'm going to explain how Darwinia, our proprietary trading challenge, actually works. My name is Juan, and I'm one of the co-founders of Darwinex. And I'd love to get your feedback on anything you hear from me in this brief tutorial. So, Darwinia, we're going to cover what it actually is. We'll also explain how it works, going actually into the Darwinex interface for you to see the practical examples. Then I go through why we actually do it, what's in it for you, and last but not least, what's next after you read up on this one. So what is Darwinia? Darwinia is a trading challenge which is designed to rule out luck from returns, which makes it different from any other trading challenge out there. If you think of your average trading challenge, what people measure is what return a trading strategy obtained and how much risk was involved in obtaining that return. And that really what it answers is what risk-adjusted returns were obtained by the strategy. What Darwinia does in addition to this is to answer if these returns were obtained by highlighting investable attributes, which is the IA at the end of Darwinia, which is another way of saying we answer in addition to what risk-adjusted returns were obtained, how they were achieved. You're probably asking yourself what those investable attributes are, so let's go through them one bit at a time. The first one is experience, which is another way of saying, well, have we even seen enough data to issue a conclusion on whether this strategy is any good? This is merely a statistical factor to filter out for significance. The second element is a discipline element, which is checking whether stop losses and take profits are consistently informed by the strategy. Third, very important, is risk management, which boils down into two sub-criteria. The first one is whether leverage is consistent across trades, and whether in turn this leverage is consistent with a risk which doesn't change over time. Fourth is timing. What we ask here is if this strategy had opened or closed the trades slightly earlier or slightly later, would it have made more money or less? And if it actually beats all of these alternatives, then this is a pretty good indication. Fifth is performance, where we check whether the strategy can beat random strategies which have comparable risk. And last but not least is scalability, which is another sector where we're quite different, because what we check here is whether the returns that the strategy is achieving scale as the managed capital scales. This is very important because the last thing you want to do is to have a strategy which wins for the owner but loses for the investors that replicate it. So if I told you that there were two strategies that made 20% last year, and on the left hand side we have one strategy where no investable attributes were detected, so we haven't seen evidence of discipline, risk management, timing, or performance. Now, if you've seen that the strategy has made money, but you don't see any evidence that skill was behind it, then it's very likely that this strategy, this 20%, was random. And of course, if it won randomly last year, it's going to be random next year as well, which offers you no guarantee whatsoever that the strategy is actually investable. And that's why basically we have done Darwinia to rule out lucky monkeys, which is what this strategy seems to have been. And to find strategies which do win, and this is the key point, and in addition to winning, also highlight evidence of investable attributes. And that's why that is important, is because the strategy seems to have been much better than random, which offers you as much guarantee as you're going to get that it will also win next year. In other words, Darwinia really is designed for Darwinian selection, and it's detecting skilled winners for their and smart investor benefit. It basically allows those that win without luck to stand out from the haystack of those that just won randomly. So how does it work? There are four core elements. First is the 0 to 10 score for each of the individual investable attributes. Those 6 scores are then combined into a global score, which is weighted from the individual investable attribute scores. Then there's the skill cheese, on which more in a second. And of course the leaderboard, which ranks all the investable strategies for investor benefit. Easiest to see this is to actually go into the Darwinex interface, which I'll do right now, and click through to Darwinia. Or maybe let's just go through the leaderboard and find a strategy which will allow us to highlight how this works. Let's take this one. So what do we see here? Well, we see the individual scores for the investable attributes for experience, risk management, discipline, performance, timing, and scalability, all graded from 0 to 10. And now let's go through what the skill cheese actually does. So, first of all, the correspondence. So experience is the first element in the cheese. Then we have risk management, which is the second, and so on. Now you'll notice that we have 5 filled cheese, but one of them is actually empty. So this is very important. This explains how the whole thing works. So let's say the cheese that's empty is the discipline cheese. And that is because in this particular strategy, which is at the level of newbie, has a 2.7 grade in discipline, which is below the 3.0 required to pass to the next level, which would be rookie. So what this is really telling is that for this trader to get his strategy to the next level, which is actually quite easy for him because he's got very good grades in all the other investable attributes, he needs to focus on his discipline and nowhere else. And that's where the cheese guides all the efforts. One thing is to have the grades, but then of course to improve, we tell you what investable attributes is the one that's holding you back to go for the next level. Importantly also, you'll notice that, for instance, in this case, this newbie trader, he's not required to have anything else than a 0 in performance, timing, or scalability. And that's because the investable attributes are ranked in order. The most important, obviously, is initially experience, which is just to gain time in the market. Then comes risk management, discipline, performance, timing, and scalability in a succession. But what this really is telling you is that it's very, very important to focus on the skills first before you even think about the performance. Because if you're making money but you're not managing your risk properly or have no discipline, then that performance is very likely to be random. So that's so much on how to progress. Just to see how the example works, we can check another example in the leaderboard. For instance, let's go to Klondike and see the first guy at the top. So what do we see? Well, we see a higher score, and we also see that he's at the level of expert already, as you can see here. And where he needs to focus to make it to the level of pro are in the 3 empty cheese elements, skill elements, which are discipline. You see that when I pass the mouse over here, it marks the discipline cheese. And then, so risk management, discipline, and scalability. Okay, so what's in it for you if you do well in Darwinia? Well, obviously, there's no fooling yourself. If you win and meet all the investable attributes, you can be sure that there's no luck to it. Whereas if you're not managing a risk, for instance, properly, it could be that you're winning by randomly taking more leverage in winners than losers, even though your strategy may not be any good and you think it is, thus fooling yourself. Second is obviously that this is an institutional assessment. If you went to Goldman Sachs and asked for a trading job, the elements that they would assess you on would be very, very similar to these. So this is pretty much your CV as a trader. The third, this is very important, is that we have analyzed thousands of track records to figure out what makes the winners, the consistent winners, different from just lucky winners. And we have identified these 6 that correlate with consistent long-term performance. In other words, we can prove that if you have high grades on the investable attributes, you will very likely do better than average against others who don't do well there. And last but not least, and on this we'll get to more detail in other tutorials, is in addition to the investor visibility, which you get by being at the leaderboard, you also derive revenues from Darwinex. So that was it, a brief introduction to Darwinia. Hope it helped you. And then, of course, you should know that you can get your own personal score at Darwinex. It's 100% free. If you have questions, feedback, or suggestions on any of this, feel free to reach out to me at juan@darwinx.com, or just add me on Skype, and I'll be delighted to go through any questions. And of course, to explain your personal score. So looking forward for you to reach out. Take care. Bye-bye.